I know for sure that you clicked on this video and are probably thinking the same thing I'm thinking, which is what is with classification rating systems? I've had this question for quite a while now because when you start to understand them, you'll see a movie that shouldn't be rated what it is. So those are the kind of things that I want to look at today and get an idea of what these rating systems mean and look at some examples of weirdly rated movies. Before I do that though, let's have a look at some of the most well-known rating systems worldwide, and since I live in Australia, let's start off with our classification system known as the Australian Classification Board. The name's pretty simple, but also the rating system itself is pretty simple, with G being general audiences, PG being parental guidance, M being mature audiences, MA15 plus is still mature audiences, but you have to be at least 15 to watch it without a parent. R18 plus is basically the same thing, but you have to be 18, and X is only used for... But get this, Australia uses this classification system not only for movies and shows, but for video games as well. Yeah, so to make it easier down here, we use the same classification system for basically everything, instead of what every other country does by having two separate systems. How do they rate movies though? Well, there's obviously different criteria that the movies get rated by, and these are the general ones. Themes, violence, language, drug use, nudity, and sex. And they use the ratings in the rating system to classify the rating of each section, with the highest rating out of any of these categories being the rating of the media. That's cool and all, but to describe what they're talking about on the front of movies, they'll slap on like a mild themes or a violence category on there. I gotta say that it also helps that our classification system is government funded, so they probably thought that it was easier just to have one system, which yes it is. From there in the US, you have the MPA, which is the Motion Picture Association of America, which their system goes G, PG, PG-13, R, and NC-17. Got it right. But to make it a bit more confusing, they decided to have a completely separate classification system for video games, which is known as the ESRB. The acronym is short for the Entertainment Software Rating Board, and their system goes E for everybody, E10+, T for teen, M for mature 17+, and AO being for adults only, which is 18+. With the MPA, they rate their movies based on violence, language, substances, nudity, and sex. But oh boy, the ESRB decided to add a million categories to make it more confusing. I'm gonna have to read this off my phone because there is no chance I'm gonna remember all this, but basically it goes alcohol reference, animated blood and gore, comic mischief, think that's it, but fucking hell, that's long. They really couldn't just simplify it down to 6 categories like everyone else? Speaking about that, let's go to the UK to look at their film classification system, which is the British Board of Film Classification. Their ratings go U for Universal, PG, 12, 15, 18, and their R18 is actually quite straightforward, and then we get into the game system, which is PEGI, and it's actually used for most of Europe, and is probably one of the most straightforward and honestly best rating systems out there. You have 3, 7, 12, 16, 18, and... Yeah, that's good on its own, but instead of a vague description of what the material contains, they show you images that tell you what's in the game, such as bad language, discrimination, drugs, fear, gambling, sex, violence, and even in-game purchases. Doesn't this just make it so much easier for parents to actually understand what their kid is going to be buying? Like, just having these images up there makes it a lot easier for them to understand what's in the game. With that though, of course rating systems are controversial, since there are honestly a lot of instances of the classification systems getting a game or movie's ratings wrong. For this, I will be talking about how our beautiful Australian classification board stuffs up, but let's start off with movies first. Of course, the most popular form of media has a lot of mistakes in its rating system, such as how a movie like Watership Down is still sitting at a casual PG down here. Well, it isn't as bad as the BBFC, where the film's rated U, and it's still rated U. Other movies such as Batman and Robin are rated M, even though the previous movie Batman Forever is rated PG. Which you would think that it's the opposite way around, but no. Batman and Robin is still M for some weird reason. On the topic of weirdly rated movies, I find that some movies like Kick-Ass and Dredd could actually be rated R considering what actually happens in the movies, but nah, MA15+. With that, the terrible 2019 Hellboy movie's rated R, which I find to be much tamer than both Kick-Ass and Dredd. Thank you, Australian Classification Board, for letting me see those movies before I should have. Another thing you'll notice with the Australian Classification Board is that they can't be bothered to go back and reclassify old movies. Movies like Halloween 1 and 2, which are quite tame horror movies by today's standards, both sit at R18+. On the other hand, you have movies like Gremlins and Ghostbusters that are still rated PG, but if you ask me, they should really be rated M. For some strange reason though, the 2016 Ghostbusters reboot is rated M. Lastly, how does a movie like Babe have a G rating, when you have scenes like this as one of the sheep is dying after being mauled by dogs? By the way, these movie covers with the main character's face on a plain background suck ass. One thing you really notice is that Australia is really soft with movies a lot of the time. And a great example of that is Cannibal Holocaust. I'm not joking. Yeah, an infamously banned movie in a lot of countries worldwide, and for good reason. You can actually buy it here in Australia with an R18+ rating. Uncut, by the way. How wild. A movie with real animal cruelty is allowed to be released here in Australia, but a movie like Solo, which yes, is fucked up on its own, isn't allowed here. Hey, at least Solo didn't do illegal things like kill animals. So since Australia is quite soft on movies down here, how are they with video games? The complete opposite. Of course, the Australian Classification Board can refuse classification for anything they want to make the material banned in Australia, and video games copped it the worst. You know the 1992 Quentin Tarantino movie Reservoir Dogs? And do you remember the game that came out around 2006? Yeah, that's banned here. Even though the game probably has the same amount of violence compared to the movie, it was refused classification because this was around the time where video games still didn't have the R18+ rating. Many games suffered the same fate of being refused classification, with some good examples being Syndicate and Mortal Kombat 9. The reason why is because for some strange, wild reason, Australia didn't have the R18+ rating in video games until 2013. A lot of people were petitioning for the R18+ rating to be brought into the video game classification system as far back as 2005, with 88% of people supporting the rating. Obviously, it ended up taking another 8 years to actually get the rating in the system. With that though, I wouldn't have known anything about this if it wasn't for Mortal Kombat 9. On its original release in 2011, it was banned because of not having the R18+ rating for video games, but the complete edition was allowed in Australia, since it was released after they brought in the R18+ rating to the video game classification system. You'll think that it's all nice and dandy and that things wouldn't get banned after that, but no, it pretty much stayed the same. Some games actually had to alter the content in the game to be allowed in Australia, with the most well-known example being South Park: The Stick of Truth. Australia and Europe really didn't like the probing scenes in the game, so what they would do is just slap up these images depending on which nation you're in. They'd basically just explain what happened in that scene with text. On the same topic, Outlast 2 got affected by the same kind of thing, where they were originally banned because of sexual violence. They had to actually remove the scene that got the game banned where it got an 18+ rating. Australia also really doesn't like drug use in games for some reason. On this topic, games like Saints Row 4 and We Happy Few were actually refused classification due to drug use. We Happy Few got lucky, but Saints Row 4 had to cut out a whole mission to be overturned. With that, we still don't even have games like Manhunt 1 or Manhunt 2, which I find really stupid. Speaking about stupid, Grand Theft Auto was being slapped really hard by the rating systems, especially GTA 3 and San Andreas. GTA 3 was released with the MA15+ rating, but it got banned because you could pick up prostitutes, so that version of the game got banned and decided to release the game without that feature. That was until 2019 where the original game was released with an R18. Arguably, San Andreas got it worse, since I hear more about this game's controversy over GTA 3, where CJ does the chitty boom with his partner in a minigame that people like to call hot coffee. But get this, it wasn't even accessible unless you modded the game. But because mothers complained about the thing you can't access normally, the minigame of course got completely cut out of the game's code, and it ended up being re-released. But during the time of the re-release and the controversy, the game was actually banned. But hey, I don't know how to finish this video besides from saying that the old Australian rating systems ads are very nostalgic to me. Also, you should subscribe.